A little bit about me before we get going. So I've been in Asia a long time, 35 years. I've started a bunch of companies, 6 startups. I've had 3 exits. I started mtvasia.com here. I worked with Telstra. I worked with ADB Ventures. I'm probably the only person you'll ever meet who worked for Asian Development Bank and MTV, right? Kind of a different thing. And I work with a lot of, now I work with a lot of startups, and I coach founders, and I do some corp dev as well. And I'm based in Bangkok, okay? So that's me. So some of you may remember that when we did this in Bangkok a couple of years ago, right? Is this the same talk? No, this is not the same talk. Because really everything has changed. And if you've been here all week, and most of us have been here all week in this room, I think the real meta picture is really about change, right? That's the message, whether it's AI or whether it's business or whether it's your technology or how you're doing, whether it's Gradient or whether it's Vietnam, it's all really about change. So I first came to Vietnam in 1991, and this is what it looked like. Downtown here, slightly different, as we can tell. And now, today it's this, right? In one generation, right? One generation, 30 years. And that's really kind of what we're going to be talking about today, is just how we've moved from that was Vietnam, but everybody's changing here. All the countries are changing here, right? All the businesses are changing here. I spoke with a bunch of you over the course of the week, and if you think about where we were in January of 2025 globally, here we are a year later, January 2026, the whole world is different, right? I didn't vote for him, okay, to be clear. As the token American, I did not vote for him, but I don't know, maybe you can connect those dots, but the entire world is very different right now, and who knows where it's gonna go. So this part of the world is changing. Certainly Lars and Gradient and everybody's talking about change. A year ago this was NFQ. It's not NFQ anymore, it's Gradient, right? Before it was doing one thing, now it's doing something else. And what Lars talked about is, managing that change and looking at that change. And what Judith was talking about is, how are we looking at new clients, and how are we looking at new processes, and how are we looking at what we're doing in those companies, right? So, why this session? It's really important to think about the region. I've started a bunch of companies in the region, pretty much in every country in Southeast Asia. I've not started companies in Timor-Leste or in Brunei, but kind of every other country in Southeast Asia, I've started at least one company. I've had 3 in Thailand, I've had 3 in the Philippines, I've done a lot in Singapore, but it's no longer an emerging market. Right? It used to be emerging market, especially if you're coming from outside the region. If you're from the States or from Europe, Asia was interesting. We maybe come here on vacation or for this or that. And it was like, we do outsourcing there, but it was still emerging markets. It's not that today. Expansion opportunities are huge. They're bigger and better than they've ever been here. But the entry strategies are more important. And the people who are going to win here are not necessarily moving faster, they're moving smarter, right? So a lot of people who, I teach courses on expanding your company into Asia or around Asia, or for startups in Singapore who are going to Indonesia or India or something like that, right? So a lot of the preconceptions are, it's an outsource. It's an outsourced place, a place where you can go have somebody do your back end office or your software development, or it's low cost. Maybe you think it's a single market. Maybe you think it's one size fits all. Those are no longer true. That may have been true once. It's no longer true now. So let's just go back and do a little mini course on ASEAN. It's not going to be like last time where I talked a lot about the facts, but everybody should get the basic numbers here. 11 countries. My map only has 10 countries because nobody shows Timor-Leste in ASEAN. It's teeny weeny part that used to be Indonesia, but it's not anymore. Okay, 700 million people, 50% are below 30 years old, right? You see it on the street here, right? Everybody's younger than us, pretty much. Well, than me, for sure. And the GDP is about $4 trillion, right? US dollars. Comparison, Asia or Europe has 27 countries, less people, about a quarter are above 65 years old, right? A much bigger GDP, but yeah, this year. Yeah, we'll see what happens in a couple of years, but it's actually changing. As you will see in this slide, this is the GDP growth of the EU versus ASEAN. And with the exception of 1 year post-COVID, ASEAN is kicking butt, right? Every year, all the countries are growing collectively. This is where the growth engine is. It's not talked about a lot outside of Asia, but this is what's going on, right? So another thing to think about here is it's not monolithic. 20 time income variations amongst countries, hundreds of different languages. I was in Papua New Guinea, worked with a project with the UN a couple of years ago, and there were 600 dialects in Papua New Guinea alone. Okay, just one little bit of one little country, right? I was doing a market entry study actually for the German accelerator, bringing a lot of German companies here, and I was doing a study on welcome to Thailand, right? Here's the Thai market. And it turns out that only 60% of people in Thailand speak Thai, right? I was shocked, I've been doing this for 30 years. 30% of them speak Lao, right? Who knew this? But I thought that, Thailand was one language. Nope, not at all. And it's the same thing in every other country, right? So of course there's different regulations, different incentives, different labor laws, and even within the same sector or the same country, there's different speeds, right? All of you have probably taken a Grab here, the Grab call service for your car. When Grab started in Indonesia, they learned that what worked in one part of Java, in one island out of the 1,700 islands, didn't work at the other end of the island. They had to rejig the entire app. They had to redo all of the customer service. They had to redo all of the marketing. Even though you're only 600 miles apart on the same island in the same country, the cultures were so different that they needed to make localized versions of those, okay? So it's a very different way of looking at business. It's not monolithic. So if you're considering coming to this part of the world, it's not one size fits all, right? So some key drivers and change drivers here. What's going on now in this part of the world? Increased standards of living. You can see it, You can see from my pictures. And if you've been coming to Vietnam for the past 3 or 4 years, if you're, A, if you live here, but B, if you come here as part of the summit, you see it. You see it on the street, right? You see it pre-COVID, post-COVID. There's more money, there's more buildings, there's more infrastructure. There's this new airport's going to be opened by next year, right? There are all those new bridges and tunnels. And that's just this country. Higher education levels. Domestic consumption is up. You see it, the stores, what's on the shelves of the stores has changed. People are coming from the countryside into the cities, not only here, but in Thailand or in Malaysia or in the Philippines, you see that. And digital adoption and infrastructure are changing. So the real bottom line here is these economies are becoming demand-led. People here are spending money and demanding different kinds of things, whether it's healthcare or better housing or better infrastructure or better education. Those demands are starting to drive the economies rather than making stuff cheaply, right? And that's a huge change. And that's really been not even the last decade, maybe the last 5 to 7 years, right? It's really pretty remarkable. And as you saw from the GDP, it's just going to go faster and faster and faster. So that's what we're talking about. If you're thinking about coming here, you need to be aware of that curve and be ahead of it. It's no longer just doing stuff cheap here. So the workforce is evolving as well. Younger, faster, technical workforce. I mean, if you do work with Gradient, you know that most of the people are pretty young. If you're a client, they're younger than you by a long shot, right? A lot of workers are comfortable working with automation and AI, and there's a lot of mobility involved. People go to different jobs, they work from home, they travel, look at Gradient's a good example. In Vietnam, there's 3 offices right around the country, 4 offices, and Thailand, and Egypt. And that's just the way it's going to be from now on, right? And people move. Johannes, where's Johannes? He moves around, he's here, he's there, I was here, I was there, right? Everybody's doing this. This is just part of what it's like. People don't always have that assigned seat in that assigned office anymore. And the younger you are, the more comfortable you are with that ambiguity. Yeah. So what does this mean? Faster system adoption, scalable delivery models, human and AI teams. This is all what Lars is talking about. I did not coordinate this with Lars, but this is the reality, right? It's not only this company, but it's all companies, and it's companies like you that need to be thinking this way, right? So you're coming here, you're not hiring cheaper anymore, although it may be cheaper, but you're hiring more adaptable systems and people who are thinking outside the box and thinking new ways to solve problems. ASEAN is no longer a cost play. It used to be a cost play, right? 5 years ago, you came here, maybe with Gradient NFQ, because it was cheaper, right? I mean, that was one of the real drivers, right? If you're in Germany or you're in Western Europe, it's a lot cheaper to be working here. But even if it is, that's not the only reason you're here anymore. Skills and wages have risen steadily in the region. You're seeing that. Competition's intensified. Your projects are more complex and sophisticated, and delivery models are being rebuilt. And I think it's really notable for a number of us went to Digitex, the Digitex tour the other day, and we saw, and those of you who didn't go, it's a company that has been here 25 years, I guess, now? Started as a business process outsourcing, BPO, call center, kind of help desk, that kind of stuff. Now it's none of that, right? They have 1,400 people? Is that what he said, 1,400 people? And Frank Schellenberg, he said yesterday, but he also said when we took the tour, that 5 years ago in his office, the big difference is 5 years ago, you heard people typing. You don't hear people typing anymore. Now they're clicking, right? They've automated all of their processes. They're not doing data entry. They've done AI systems and processes where it's a yes, no kind of input from the operator, from the people there, right? So they're no longer doing the basic, hi, can I help you kind of stuff. They're doing high-end, very sophisticated security, back office for banks, back office for insurance companies. That's how an outsourced company has changed here in 5 years. Right? It's really remarkable. And that's what's going on all around you. So I thought that was pretty cool. So let's talk about how opportunity is showing up in ASEAN now. I've divided it into 4 growth vectors, okay? And understanding these will help you think about how to engage here more if you want to bring your business here or sell your products here, right? This isn't only about outsourcing or having a development team here or a sales team here. It's actually maybe you're selling products or services into this market because there's money in more sophisticated audiences, right? So the drivers are middle class growth in urban areas. Manufacturing is transforming greatly. Digital leapfrogging, which we'll talk about in a second, which I think is really cool. And then the other thing that you need to be aware of is regional complexity, is that what goes on here is different than what goes on in Malaysia. What goes on here is different what goes on in Hanoi. What goes on here is different what's going on in Da Nang. That every place is now different, and that affects what you do, where you do, how you do it. All right? So. Vector number 1 is urban middle class expansion. Rising incomes, urban density, domestic consumption. You see it here on the streets in the city, greatly. And it's fueling a housing boom in major ASEAN cities. You go to Jakarta, it's the same thing. Sleepy old Jakarta 10 years ago. Nobody's here who does work in Indonesia, but a bunch of people here have done work in Indonesia. It was the same thing in Jakarta as it is here. 7 years ago, there was no public transportation. Now there's public transportation. Whole city changes. Where people live, where they shop, where they buy, where they work, right? Completely changes things. Also, building, the fastest growth is not in luxury condos in Southeast Asia. It's in mid-rise apartments for dual income families. You didn't have dual income families 10 years ago, right? So what does that mean in terms of your market? What does that mean in terms of your workers? It's really quite remarkable. What do they buy? What services do they consume? And what they do consume is private hospitals, tutoring and after-school programs, right? Ride-hailing platforms like Grab, right? Those were not products that were viable here or even existing in emerging markets like Ho Chi Minh City, like Jakarta, like Manila. Okay, but now you're starting to see it because as people are more educated and earn more money, they have more voice in what they want to buy or what they'll put up with. And if something doesn't work well, they will go and have the money and the flexibility to go seek it and buy it somewhere else, which is, a really radical change from a traditional culture. So the opportunities here are health and wellness, education, education, education. You throw a stick on the street here and you hit a school. It's crazy. There's a school on every block for something. Travel and hospitality tech. Thailand is all about hospitality. It's all about travel. And domestic travel is happening as well. That Vietnamese now have enough money to go to other parts of Vietnam, or they go to Thailand, or they go to the Philippines, right? You didn't see that before. All that is starting to change now. So an entirely new layer of services and products is coming online, is being invented and available. Second part here is manufacturing transformation, and you see it downstairs with the robotics and at the center that Gradient has, but also everywhere. It's no longer labor arbitrage. It's no longer getting cheaper people to do more things. You're throwing 50 people as solving a problem. It's how do we do this smarter and better, right? Volume first, get 10,000 pairs of Nikes out the door by February 15th, right? That's what it was here a couple of years ago, right? Now it's like, who builds the best shoes in the world? Who makes the best computer chips? Who makes the best IV tubes, right? This is a very different change, right? Not a lot, it's better, from a lot to better, yeah? Manual input, Digitex was the example there, but that happens everywhere. Instead of people doing that, now it's all online, all in the cloud, all modification, all approval, all sophisticated kinds of monitoring those systems. And it doesn't happen in a single country. A company like Nike makes things all over Southeast Asia. Mattel makes Barbies in 10 countries in Southeast Asia, right? That's how it works now. If you're supplying these companies or selling into these companies, think, you're not only going to one market, you're going to multiple markets, right? And automation and AI is all changing things. I'm not going to talk about AI today because everybody else talks about AI. You don't need to hear it from me. But
you expected that from you, that you give
well, I wrote this all, on ChatGPT, so. Yeah. But AI is affecting everything, right? I mean, whatever I'm talking about here, you have to assume that there's a major AI layer and a driver for change and a catalyst for change. And who knows where that's going to go, right? We don't know, but it's going to be there. That's what we know. And that's kind of what you was talking about too. You got to be open to that process and those changes, right? Because if you're not in the game. You're out of the game in 2 years. That horse is gone, that car is gone, and you have a garage, but you don't have anything else, right? So, for example, EV and battery manufacturing in Southeast Asia is just like exploding. In Thailand, I have a friend of a friend who manufactured parts for German automakers, for your BMWs and your Porsches and your Volkswagens and all that. Their factory is operating 3 days a week now. 3 days a week. Because the domestic market in Europe is going this way because electric vehicles are taking off, right? So who's making the batteries? Who's doing the after-sale service? All of those kinds of things. You see it a lot in Thailand, which has a lot of automotive production, but you see it here too. I'm in Phnom Penh 3 times last year. 50% of the cars in Phnom Penh are electric vehicles now, right? A whole 50%.
Not only that, I was impressed 5 years back, and now here you see WinFast, like half of every
Right.
car is WinFast.
Exactly. So this whole part of the economy, the support and the building of that part of the economy is just booming in this part of the world, right? Semiconductor fabrication too. Automation is also happening at the SME level, right? Traditionally, automation was happening at the big factory level, right? But now, especially like in Thailand, you see SMEs are, maybe it's the second generation or the third generation of the owners. They know how computers work. They're using AI. They're using online processing. Stuff's in the cloud. All of that's just rapidly changing now. And precision manufacturing, the further along this curve as we go, the more sophisticated that manufacturing will become. And if you know or work in chip fabrication, you know that some bits happen here and then stuff gets shipped over there and then stuff goes to the Netherlands and then it goes to Malaysia and then it goes to Taiwan and then it goes to Texas. It's also coming here, okay? So digital leapfrogging, I love this. When I was just out of college, I worked for USAID, which no longer exists anymore. But when it did, I used to make films for them and I got to interview all of these really interesting people. And there was a futurist, this woman named Hazel Henderson, and she explained to me in 1983 what digital leapfrogging was. And I had no idea what she was talking about. But the whole premise is you go from a culture that does not have any electronics or any sophistication technologically, and then they don't need that next step. They just jump over it, right? And that's what we're seeing here. You know, cash to QR codes without using credit cards. I don't even know what credit card penetration here is, but maybe it's 20%. What's QR code penetration here? 107%, right? Everybody has QR codes, right? It's just amazing how that's really changed. And that's almost all been post-COVID, right? COVID just made, boom, QR codes are everywhere. The lady who's selling noodles on the street in Thailand at 3 in the morning, she's got a QR code. I don't need cash. I go to the ATM once a month now, right? If that, and I still have money in the pocket. So that's a huge change, right? Super apps, you know, you go to Grab, you can buy insurance from Grab, you can buy socks from Grab, you can buy food from Grab, you can buy your airplane tickets from Grab, right? You can buy flowers for your girlfriend or boyfriend from Grab, all while ordering a car, right? That's huge, right? That whole mindset comes from China. I was just back in the States. I didn't see it very much in the States. I don't know what it's like in Europe, having one place where you can go do all of these things. But this is a huge driver here. And then you have that affinity, right? Maybe you're a Gojek person, or maybe you're a Grab person, or maybe you're in a Shopee or a Lazada. But once you're there, I buy everything on Lazada, which is like the Amazon of Southeast Asia, right? Whether it's socks or air conditioners or curry powder, or literally I buy all these things from this place, right? And it shows up in 2 days, right? I don't even have to get dressed. And there it is, right? It's amazing. So all of those things are changing, right? And so your mid-level stores don't really exist. You may have specialty stores and you may have these things, but you know, that main street is really changing. And chat-based commerce, maybe we don't do that, but if you have kids or teens or know of them, you know, the way you buy things online, where you're talking to people, you're talking to bots, you have celebrities telling you to buy things, and you can interact with them. It's huge here. That whole buying customer journey is just totally changed, right? So, 8 markets out of the ASEAN 10, right? So it's 10 countries. We're not talking about Timor-Leste. And the other 10 countries, 8 of them have a QR code that works across the other countries. So I can use my Singapore bank account here with a QR code. I can use my Thai bank account here. You know, Vietnam's a little slow off the mark, but in general, this is something that's very easy to do. And it just changes. What's a bank now? Do you need a bank, right? What is a bank for? How do you buy things? So cloud native tools, IT infrastructure, all of that stuff is changing to support this. And then regional complexity. So this is the brakes, okay? This is the cautionary bit here, okay? So look at the number of languages we have in Indonesia or the Philippines. Those are just in those countries, right? So this is this is your one size does not fit all slide, okay? There's all these different cultures, there's different languages, there's different dialects within the languages, there's different ways that you do things. And then let's say if you're doing business in Thailand and you're selling to the Philippines and to Singapore, different import laws, different taxes, different papers to be filed, different withholding regimes, all of those things, right? So I lived through this personal hell with this, where I was selling, I had a company that sold goods to help with drive-through restaurants. You know, the "may I take your order please" kind of stuff, the headsets and the monitoring of that, okay? Killing it in the Philippines, killing it in Singapore, killing it in Malaysia. Come to Thailand, same stuff. We have headsets for McDonald's, right? It was a 15-month approval process because the batteries in the headsets were a restricted item, right? Who knew, right? I didn't know. And I tell everybody, I teach companies how to do this stuff, right? Like, make sure you know where you're going, make sure you know all the rules. I didn't do that. 15 months, I had a team, I had sales. I could not bring the things in because there was a 15-month approval process for the batteries in my headset, right? They worked in every other country, but not Thailand. So there are all of those little surprises that you have to look at when you come here and spend time thinking about. Okay? Asymmetrically is a very good word. It's a very good word because that sums it up here really well. And one of my favorite words, when I first came to Vietnam, I lived here for a year and a half. I learned very little Vietnamese, but one of the phrases I learned very early on was "phức tạp," which means complex and complicated. But I could remember, for some reason I could remember this phrase. I don't know, but it really sums up what goes on, right? But if you know how to do this stuff, no, but it's a barrier. It's a moat. If you can understand how to import these goods and take care of the taxes and, do the goods over here and do the stuff over there, then you have a moat and you have a defensible position. I worked for a Israeli POS terminal company once, okay? And the guy is a Turkish venture capitalist. He really wanted to sell into Indonesia because he loved Indonesia and he was there all the time. But you cannot import Israeli goods into Indonesia, okay? There's all these rules against it, and, so what I was able to do was to figure out a way to get the goods to a free trade zone off of Singapore called Batam, put them in a box in Batam, and put on the box assembled in Indonesia, and then I was able to import them in, right? Although all I was doing was putting them in a box, right? But that's how you manage this complexity. But other Israeli products couldn't do that, and we kicked butt, But you need to figure out how to do those things that aren't so obvious, okay? So I know I'm talking a lot. I just want to quickly run through the 4 key countries in Southeast Asia that I think you might be interested in if you're planning to come here, okay? So highlights, start with Vietnam. What I think is really important in these numbers is the median age of these countries, right? And also, what the GDP per capita is. It's pretty low here still, But the top 3 industries: manufacturing, agriculture, services, and tourism. Where's the potential here? Manufacturing technology. That value-added manufacturing, the more sophisticated manufacturing is the number 1 sector right now in Vietnam, the number 1 economic driver, followed by robotics and automation, as you can see, and then industrial SaaS. Those are the growth areas. 5 years ago, it would have been agriculture. It could have been maybe petroleum and oil products, right? Maybe those would have been the big ones, right? But now there's nothing. This is all tech-based. Being able to remotely enhance processes, okay, for factories, okay? You don't need to be on site to make sure that this thing goes to that thing, right? You can set it up with, and track it like whether it's an SAP kind of product or whether it's a process for, controlling the robots in the warehouses. Those are products that don't need to be used on the ground necessarily or applied on the ground. They can be applied from somewhere else, right? So a lot of public policy. So what was it last week? When the government?
Innovation Center.
Correct. There was that, and then also the government as a whole had a new 5-year plan just came out, right? Up until what 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, you could not repatriate money from Vietnam. So part of the problem with the startup scene here was you invest in this company, it kicks butt. But if you're a foreign investor, well, money has to stay in Vietnam, right? So it didn't help local innovation integrate globally, because why would you invest in a country where you can't get the money out, right? So the IFC now that they're setting the International Financial Center, it's sort of a free trade zone at a hyper level here in Ho Chi Minh City. Now, if a company is based there, I can get my money out. Oh, that'll change the game significantly, right? All the global investors will say, hell yeah, I'm going there because 100 million people here, and they're all hungry for my products. So really significant changes. And I think if and when we come back in 2 years to this Gradient Summit again, you'll see a lot more change. It's so fast here, right? Indonesia, third largest country in the world, fourth largest country in the world, almost 300 million people. It's huge. It's 5 time zones. It's that big, right? Again, median age 29 years, right? Only 15% of the population's above 50. So you have a lot of buying power coming online in Indonesia. Not only is it giant, but you have a lot of people coming online here. Really interesting market. There still traditional industries, natural resources and mining drive a lot of the economy, and manufacturing, but now increasingly there's a domestic market as well for domestically made goods. And people want to go to supermarkets. They want to buy locally made shoes. They don't need Levi's or Chinese products. Things are being made in Indonesia for Indonesians. So fintech, logistics, government adjacent platforms, the government is spending a lot of money to enhance this, right? And the domestic demand is just enormous, right? It's the biggest in Southeast Asia, right? I mean, you have China, you have India, you have Indonesia, and you have the United States. I mean, those are the top 4 markets. So Indonesia's number 3, right? Enormous capacity. And now that you have finally telcos, and you have telephone coverage and digital coverage, pretty much all around Indonesia. For a long time, all the islands made it very difficult, but now people have phones and they have computers, and they have the ability to do stuff online, and everybody's 23 years old. It's going to change. Thailand, 70 million people. Older population, second oldest population in Southeast Asia. Okay, so over a third of the people are above 50 years old. I am helping to build a wellness platform for seniors in Thailand because of that number, right? That's the number, because diabetes is coming online, heart disease is coming online. People are not eating as well. But if a third of your population is over 50, that's a boom market, right? So your industries are automotive parts, right? Tourism and leisure, obviously, although that's on the decline as the baht gets stronger. And agricultural products. It's so there's 800 companies in Thailand that export to the U.S., food products to the U.S. It's enormous. It's a really big number. So the high potential is still in hospitality, tech. Which hotels and which services and which tourism services can beat the other ones in booking and making sure that you get to the right place, make sure that you're covered and you have insurance. All of that stuff's happening. Health tech is booming. Thailand essentially invented medical tourism, and every hospital in Bangkok now has a medical tourism product and service, and representatives in the Middle East, in Europe, in North America. People come to Thailand to get their gallbladder out, or me to get my knees replaced, or whatever, which I did. I went there because great medical care, a third of the price of what it was in Singapore, probably an eighth of the price of what it was in the United States. Very good care, boom, 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 and that's a growth market there. And then the EV ecosystem is also happening, right? Both on the production side and on the consumption side. And Thailand is also connected very well regionally. Multiple ports, right? On both coasts. It's a two-coast country. And great train system. And also some very strong air freight and air traffic. And it has been the real air hub for freight for many, many years. And finally, Singapore. So Singapore's teeny weeny. It's got about 6 million people. We could run across it before dinner, median age, this is the oldest population in Southeast Asia, 42, 43 years old, right? Almost 40% is over 50, so an aging population, a growth rate that's below sustainable levels. It's not replicating, it's like 1.3 people, babies per couple. So they have a problem there, and consumption is going to be tagged to that. Anything for schools at all is going to be very different. But their top three industries obviously are financial services and insurance, and that's what the government tries to bring in because it's high value add, and people generate a lot more money per head of employees. Advanced services and tech and trade and logistics. Singapore is the king of logistics, right? It's arguably the busiest port in the world. The Netherlands may challenge that, but between the Netherlands and Singapore, you have the busiest ports in the world, right? And what you have a benefit of, it's very easy to set up companies there. You have your regional HQ. Singapore has spent 35 years making this very easy. In 90 minutes, I swear, I'm not making this up, in 90 minutes with 3,000 Sing dollars, you can walk out of there with a corporation, a private limited company. Boom, 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 boom. It's awesome. They've done a great job doing it. Closing your company there, not so easy, as I've learned, but you're going to come on in, set up your company here. And the attraction is also investors and partners know there's a banking system, know there's a legal system, know all of these things work. So in my work with startups, and Gradient's a good example, you have your operating headquarters there, right? The banks work, the lawyers like it, the investors like it, the money travels quickly and cleanly, very little corruption. Then you have your office here, you have your office in Myanmar, you have your office in, Bangkok, whatever, but the headquarters is in Singapore, and they've done a great job for doing that. But it is not a market unto itself. When you take out all the foreign workers who are doing construction work, which is about a third of the population, you take out all the old people, and you take out all the young people, you have really a domestic market of about 1.5 million people. So unless you're like Prada, forget it. Don't even worry about trying to sell there because you have a very small population. Okay, it's an afterthought, but your business infrastructure starts there, right? And they make it very easy to come to the region, and they've done a really excellent job. I have mixed reviews about Singapore after living there 35 years, but I give them 5 stars for doing this. They've done a great job. So presence does not mean success.
May I ask a question at this point?
Sure.
So does it mean that you, let's say, established a company in Singapore, and this company operates, for example, in the other countries?
That's what Gradient is doing.
Yeah, that's what Gradient does, yeah. And many companies do that too. Singapore gives you tax breaks, and they do this, and they do that. And if you come here and you don't go to Hong Kong or you don't go to China, we'll give you all these goodies, and we'll train your teams. But at the end of the day, there are virtually no software developers in Singapore. So if you want to do any sort of software engineering, it's not the place to do it. And if you do want to do it, you're competing against Deutsche Bank, right?
Does it mean I need to have a kind of a subsidiary or a specific company in Vietnam?
Yeah.
So this kind of a holding structure.
Exactly. And each of these countries, Vietnam or Malaysia or Thailand, all have their own specific rules of how you can do that, and whether it can be majority foreign owned or majority local owned. So it's not quite clear at level 2, but level 1 is really easy, right?
And they also assist and help with all building up the structure. So
Yeah.
it's like Dubai in the Middle East, you set it up there, and they help with all the region.
Exactly.
Singapore is where the money is, and the structure is everywhere else.
In fact, a lot of what Dubai is doing is learning from Singapore. Took 35 years to develop the process. Dubai made it into a product, right? They've done a very good job of it. So, okay, I'm almost done here. In summary, and we can do some questions. ASEAN is no longer an emerging market, right? Or a low-cost story. It's lots of things. It still has a little bit of that, but that's not the real headline story anymore. We have a manufacturing and domestic consumption powerhouse happening here, right? It's not monolithic. Thailand is not the Philippines, is not Vietnam. Increased standards of living means all sorts of things can be bought and sold here, right? Higher education levels, greater technical sophistication. You can see the higher education level in that I've skipped the number between 4 and 5. And there's plenty of opportunity here, right? To grow at your business, to sell, to manufacture, to partner, right? Those things were not really in existence 5, 7 years ago. It's a really different story now. Okay, and a couple of caveats. Partner well. You probably know some partners. You may know a couple of companies that you can do like technical work with in Vietnam, for example. Go slowly, all right? This does not happen quickly. The speed at which we may be used to things happening in the West, in our home markets, doesn't necessarily happen here. If you're importing batteries for your headsets, for example, or getting legal advice, or getting like in the Philippines, I set up a company in Manila. Okay, I had to do every piece of paper in octuplicate, and I never used that word before. That's 8 copies of every piece of paper. Okay, hand signatured, carbon paper. It required carbon copies. When was the last time anyone bought carbon paper? The last time you bought carbon paper, right? Like, do they even make it? For the Philippines, right? So stuff takes a long time.
You speak to German, so this is how their business.
I know.
It's only 8, but it's fine.
Right.
It's 4 less than you have.
There you go. Okay, excellent. So be patient. Listen more than you speak. That's the number 1 rule I give to all founders when they expand is shut up. Just ask questions and shut up. You don't know everything. You may know your thing, but like be quiet, ask questions, let the people on the ground tell you what's going on, okay? And then learn from your mistakes, because you're gonna make mistakes. This is not gonna be foolproof. It's gonna be a bumpy road. Build that into your system, build that into your budget, build it into your schedule, yeah? And I think that's it, all right? So questions, thoughts, questions?